We all know that Agumon is the poster child of the Digimon brand and card game. With constant Greymon support, it is no surprise that we continuously see this deck play almost every single format. But what about Agumon Bond of Bravery? Supposedly, it is Agumon's final and strongest form, which has seen quite a fair amount of play when it first came out, but the representation drastically fell as soon as newer sets were introduced, to the point where almost no one is talking about this deck or card anymore. And that is exactly what we are going to be covering in today's episode of Why Nobody Plays. Like always, this series is intended to critically analyze the decks and archetypes that have a low play rate, including some of the ones that used to be considered as the best decks during its prime. We'll take a look at what the cards do, its history, and talk about the issues of how it struggles to establish a win condition and identity in today's format. And we'll also talk about ways that we can improve it as well. So if you're a fan of Agumon, then be sure to get your very own Partners of Courage bundle on the AVAULT store, which includes a memory marker, keychain, and sticker to show your favorite yellow dinosaur some love. Agumon Bond of Bravery first debuted in the BT6 Double Diamond set. It is intended to promote the Digimon Adventure movie Last Evolution Kizuna, which came out all the way back in 2020. The main cards introduced within this archetype includes Agumon Bond of Bravery, Agumon, and the Tai Kamiya Tamer. Bond of Bravery is a red level 7 Digimon card that can also digivolve on top of any red level 6 Digimon card for 3 cost. It has a when attacking effect. If you have a Tamer in play, you get to delete one of your opponent's Digimon with 13,000 DP or less. The second effect is your turn. Once per turn when an opponent's Digimon is deleted, you get to trash the top card of your opponent's security stack. Then there is the Agumon, which gains you a memory when you play a Tamer that specifically has Tai Kamiya in its name. And it also gives you security +1 as a inherited effect, but only to Agumon Bond of Bravery. Tai is a 3-cost Tamer that can gain your memory and draw you a card when you push out a Agumon or Greymon from the breeding area to the battle area. It also has a main effect of once per turn, you can digivolve one of your Agumon into one Agumon Bond of Bravery in your hand for its digivolution cost, but you get to ignore its level requirements, so you can actually warp from all the way from a level 3 to a level 7. But if you do, you have to trash the top 2 cards of your security stack. And then at the end of the turn, if you have 1 or more security cards, you're gonna have to delete that Digimon at the end of the turn. There is also Red Reamer, which is the signature move of Agubond, a option card that has a main effect: delete one of your opponent's Digimon with 6,000 DP or less, or if your opponent has 3 or more Digimon in play, you get to delete one of your opponent's Digimon with 13,000 DP or less instead. I find these card effects particularly very cool because it's based on how the mechanics work, since it was designed to reflect on how it was like just like the movie. Different to Greymon Tribal, this deck is intended to function on its own without necessarily needing to digivolve on top of your stack from your level 3s to your 4s to your 5s and then 6s. As a matter of fact, your main goal is to have a 3-card combo, which is pretty stacked because it can remove up to 3 of your opponent's security and one of their Digimon all in one go when you play it all together. And that is exactly why the main strategy of this deck is to get into this combo as quickly and as early as possible. It is important to play an abundance of different Agumons in order for you to meet the synergy requirements and be able to warp as much as you can. You can also play a fair amount of level 4 Greymons to have some early game aggression, psychability, and also meanwhile setting up for your main combo at the same time. The goal is to land the main combo at least once during the game so that you can have your Agumons and Greymons deal enough damage to finish off the rest. You can also do the same by playing a couple of red hybrid Digimon to give you extra attacks, since this deck does play quite a fair amount of Tamers overall. Like I mentioned earlier, the deck did see a fair amount of play when it first came out in BT6 during the format, and actually topped several events too. The build that most players opted to play included as many Agumons as possible, and as well as the Greymon, which is the promo one from P010. The main idea is to chip away the opponent's security with your rookies and then get into Agubond when you do have the access to the combo at some point in the game, mid or late, and then you get to finish off with the rookies on the side. The defensive strategy was to play a handful of removal option cards such as Gaia Force, Atomic Blasters to prevent your opponents from rushing you down and punish them when they attack into security. But one of the biggest things is that the deck seems to have been overshadowed by its fellow counterpart, which is Agumon Bond of Friendship, since the blue deck was considered to be much more consistent and it had access to multiple powerful cards at the time, which kind of pushed Agumon Bond of Bravery to the side. And this is where we'll talk about all the weaknesses and the other issues of the archetype within itself, which caused it to see less and less play over the course of the years. Starting off with some of the obvious pain points of the deck, there's definitely a lot of consistency issues with the full power combo because you don't always have the luxury to have a BT6 Agumon specifically set up along with Agubond and Tai all together. This weakness partially comes from the lack of draw power, which the deck doesn't have a lot of, and the only source of it really just comes from the Tai Tamer, but you can only get that draw when you specifically meet that requirement, which you can't constantly rely on as well. On the other hand, we can argue that we got a ton of searching cards over time, which improves the consistency, such as Red Memory Boost, Offense Training, and even more Agumons and Greymons. However, keep in mind that Agubon still requires you to delete an opponent's Digimon in order to trash their security stack, which is not a very reliable way to give you the damage that you always need because not all the time your opponent would have something for you to delete. Also, the Red Reamer option card, which we touched upon earlier, almost sees no play at the moment because there's just far too many conditions in order for it to depend on what it can delete or remove. And one of the biggest issues is having to trash 2 security cards, which is quite a lot to pay, especially when you're not getting enough value in fact, and it makes you lose faster. Back in the BT6 format, some players would actually tech in the BT2 Magnadramon to help recover security, but it goes without saying this strategy isn't very viable anymore just because in the modern format you're going to pay a lot of memory and a lot of decks can easily capitalize off of it and then clap back. The other issue is that it doesn't really have much built-in way to finish games alone, especially after going for the big combo play. Many red decks from before and even now still utilize the Blitz Omni as their game-ending card, but the only issue is that Agubon is a level 7 itself, so you're not able to actually play that card at all in the deck either. You can make the same sort of argument vice versa to ask why red players don't play Agubon as a potential level 7 for their red decks instead, and that's because it's the same. Omnimon fits way better to help actually finish games to win you the game, which is the main goal of it, and whereas Agubon doesn't because it's great at taking out security, but it doesn't finish it off. We also haven't seen any direct support that further excels the Agumon strategy ever since it came out, and even though we did get new Agumons and Greymons to work with, they're still not actually designed to dedicate to improve the Agumon strategy. And effectively comparing it to its counterpart again, Gabumon was strictly better during the time because it was capable of making multiple attacks, which can actually help you lead to winning games instead of making one big swing. So this is the part where you guys can come in and throw in some of your own suggestions on what cards should be made to make the archetype better, and definitely comment down below. But here are some of my own rough ideas that I think could help the archetype. I did mention earlier that I was very fond of the idea of how Tai trashes your own security to resemble the movie of the time ticking, and I think it could be a really cool idea to focus more on that aspect. To start off, I think having a new memory tamer Tai that is dedicated from the movie and for the deck could be very helpful. It can have a secondary effect that trashes your own security at the start of every turn, but gives you a lot of value in return, such as playing an Agumon from hand or trash for free, having it gain rush, gaining additional memory for the turn, draw more cards, or even search the top 5 cards of your deck to gather specific pieces related to the Agumon archetype. And it doesn't necessarily have to be these specific effects that I mentioned, because the point I'm trying to make is that you can gain a lot of different advantages and opportunities that can be implemented within the card design as long as you're trashing your security to give you enough value and advantage as you're trying to build towards the combo and support its win condition. An example could even be having your Agumon gain security attack +3 for the turn in order to give you a all-in or nothing one-turn play. And overall, these ideas focus a lot on exhausting your own resources, especially when it comes to your security, but aims to give the deck an opportunity to close the game quickly and aggressively, just like what most red decks do, but has its own unique mechanic and playstyle unlike all others. The next suggestion that I have might be slightly a bit more wild and crazy, but imagine if you're able to somehow play a mix of both the Bond decks together as a double color deck, which is red and blue, just sort of kind of like Dawn and Dusk with Grace Novamon. Somehow you're able to play your Agumons and Gabumons for free, have them gain rush, and even warp into their Bond versions, and it'll be just really cool if you imagine it's like having an epic battle of the Bond decks versus Eosmon, rather than them being separate as its own archetype. And of course, one of the things that we can always consider is that as long as we get Greymon tribal support, there's always opportunities to look into adding them into the deck and trying to make it work and better than before. Now, if you haven't seen the last episode with Mamimon, then be sure to watch it right now. Also, for the next episode, we're going to be talking about 4 great dragons. So don't forget to subscribe, turn on that notification bell to stay tuned for newer episodes on this series. As always, thank you so much for watching. You guys have a great day, great night, wherever you are. See you next video, and this is AVAULT signing out.